tonight begins with St. Patrick's mission to convert the Irish to Christianity. His mission began in the 5th century and was largely confined to Ulster and Connaught. Pope Celestine had already sent Palladius to Ireland in 431 AD, and this was to serve existing Christians in the Leinster area. One of the well-known places that Patrick visited was the mountain in Mayo that was named Croagh Patrick in his honour. In pagan times, it was an important place of assembly where people gathered on the 1st of August to celebrate the festival of Lunasa and the corn harvest. This was to honour the Celtic god Lugh, or Lug, who gave his name Lunasa to the Irish name for August. Lugh was the most brilliant figure of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the divine people of Irish mythology. St. Patrick, with great diplomacy, succeeded in persuading the local people to become Christian, replacing the old god Lugh with Christ. In Gaul, there were similar Lunasa festivals to honour the same Celtic god Lugh. One of them was held on this hilltop site of Laon, northeast of Paris, and it got its name from Lugudunum, meaning the fortress of Lugh. Another pagan festival, also called Lugudunum, gave its name to the present city of Lyon. Remarkably, 100,000 people climb this mountain every year. The last Sunday in July or the first Sunday in August is a special day for pilgrims, echoing the time of the pre-Christian harvest festival. This beautiful spring well, dedicated to St. Patrick, is called Dávach Fádhraigh in Irish. The traditional date of the annual pilgrimage is between the last Sunday in July and the 15th of August, suggesting another link to the ancient pagan festival of Lunasa. The late Professor of Irish Folklore, Dáithí Ó Thógáin, has suggested that some Irish texts and Latin lives of saints indicate that holy wells were originally associated with non-Christian rituals. So the sanctity associated with all holy wells may go back to pre-Christian times. Mairead O'Dolan, who sadly died very recently, took great care of this holy well, and in her booklet finds significance and echoes of ancient practices in the way pilgrims move clockwise, the same way as the sun, on the pilgrim route around the holy well and the other stopping places. The archaeologist Niamh Whitfield argues that holy wells were used instead of baptistries as places where new converts were baptized, and suggests this as a reason for so many holy wells in Ireland. In 1718, John Dolan wrote an account about devout persons performing their stations here and being restored to sight and limb and other distempers by virtue of the well water and the grace of God. Today, it is still known for curing ailments such as depression, eczema, and even blindness. These little Iron Age mounds covered cremated burials, and similar burials were inserted onto the top of the passage grave. Thanks to the scientific method of radiocarbon dating, we know that these cremated burials took place in 100 BC, plus or minus 50 years. Kiltierney, like Croagh Patrick, could well have been an assembly place, a place where the Iron Age settlers worshipped the pagan god Lugh. Joseph O'Duffy, or Most Reverend Bishop Duffy, in his scholarly publication on Tirnach of Clones, certainly accepts that Kiltierney had been a site of pagan worship. There was also a stone circle at Kiltierney and 2 Bronze Age barrows. Undoubtedly, by burying their dead so carefully in the vicinity of the passage grave, the Iron Age settlers showed great respect for this ancient burial place. Kiltierney is called after St. Tigernach, who founded a monastery in the early 6th century. Like his Iron Age ancestors, he probably selected Kiltierney because of its very long history over thousands of years as a sacred place. Even though, as pointed out by Bishop Duffy, we've no proof that Tigernach was influenced in this way, but I suspect that the aura of sanctity about the ancient burial place still existed in Tigernach's time, and choosing it would have made it easier for him to convert the local people to Christianity. The eminent archaeologists Claire Foley and Richard Warner have just published full accounts of the Kiltierney excavations in the current volume of Ulster Journal of Archaeology. A very good account of a pilgrimage to St. Tigernach's Well has survived from the early 18th century. In 1720, Colonel Mervyn Archdall, who owned the land, had it surveyed by William Starrett. Starrett wrote an exceptionally interesting account of the site, published by John Cunningham in the Clocher Record. Starrett described this holy well as an excellent spring well, situated beside a big yew tree, and listed the many prayers that pilgrims used to recite there. The apex stone shown in this photo would have crowned the roof ridge of a 12th century church and may have held a cross. Although it is only a small fragment, this carved head, along with the apex stone, are evidence that a 12th century Romanesque church once stood at Kiltierney. At this time, a close relationship developed between the Kiltierney monks and the newly arrived Cistercian monks who had founded a monastery not far away at Assaroe. The monks of Kiltierney agreed to become a grange for Assaroe, supplying them with food produce and probably building materials and clothing. We don't have evidence that either of the two monasteries provided accommodation for pilgrims going to and from Lough Derg, but the food production carried out at Kiltierney strongly suggests this possibility. Kiltierney Monastery was also linked to what are called Cistercian cells at two island monasteries in Lower Lough Erne, White Island and Davies Island. A likely reason for this would have been to ensure regular supplies of fish for the monasteries of Kiltierney and Assaroe. The decoration of this crosshead is identical front and back. It was probably erected in the 12th century, around the same time as the new Romanesque church. Kiltierney appears to have enjoyed renewed vigour at this time, encouraged no doubt by its new role as a grange for Assaroe, and possibly also by the growing success of the Lough Derg pilgrimages. Regrettably, the extensive archaeological site of Kiltierney, which survived remarkably well until the 1970s, was largely destroyed by a local landowner at that time. Although the site had been protected by scheduling, this legislation was weak at the time and wasn't strengthened until 1995. The next place we visit is White Island with its 12th century Romanesque doorway. What makes this site special are the 6 stone figures, which are remarkable sculpture carved on the island between the 9th and the 11th centuries. Several had been used as building stones in the walls of the present church, and in 1958 members of the Fermanagh Field Club were very excited when they discovered the figure holding a crozier and bell still in position in the wall. All of the White Island figures can be shown to illustrate Christian teachings drawn from the Old and the New Testaments. What is remarkable is the large scale of the figures, quite unlike the small panels on high crosses at Galloon and Bow. The sculptor may have found inspiration from large-scale illustrations in psalters and from illustrated Gospels like the Trier Gospels, where the figure bearing the symbols of the evangelists occupies a full page. It is not unlikely that pilgrims visited White Island when the figures were on view and learned more about the Christian faith. This reconstruction by Richard Pearse takes into account the small recess on top of each figure, 4 of them opening to the back. It also reflects the fact that there are 3 matching pairs, each pair a different height. The carvings are confined to the front of each figure, except for one which has interlacing on a side. If the White Island figures were used in this way, they could have been part of a 10th or 11th century stone church. This figure was inspired by the Old Testament vision of Ezekiel. Matthew is represented by the figure of the man, the lion symbol of Mark by the 4 legs and bodies of the animals, the calf for Luke by the hind legs with hooves, and the eagle for John, depicted by the beaked heads and wings of the animal. The female figure on left represents a woman with her legs crossed and her hands pointing to the genital area. You get the impression that the sculptor enjoyed carving this grinning or grimacing face and getting across his grim message. Women are the cause of lust, just as Eve was responsible for the sin of Adam. Keep away from women. Note the costume detail of the figure on the right, the raised central band running downwards from the waist. This is inspired by the Old Testament figure of King David, and the gesture to the mouth refers to David's role as author and singer of psalms. The shepherd's staff reflects David's role in confronting Goliath, and the bag at his waist may indicate where he carried the 5 stones used in his battle against Goliath. Note again the raised central band on the lower part of the garment. When you see this image, you may be saying to yourself, what is this ancient Janus figure doing among Christian figures like those on White Island? Surely this two-faced figure is part of pagan Fermanagh. The fact that the 2 figures are set back to back led archaeologists, including myself, to compare it to the 2-faced Roman god Janus and to a belief that it predated Christianity. And even the poet Seamus Heaney wrote a fine poem about the figure, giving it the title January God and recalling the power of the Roman god. Even today, looking at this remarkable sculpture with both faces looking forbidding, not at all friendly, even a bit ferocious, and on this side having a mouth that seems to be sticking out his tongue at us. It is not easy to understand what it means. However, a discovery in 2001 has dramatically changed some of our previous assumptions about this strange carving. Note the carving of a hand on the newly found stone leaning against the Bow Island figure. In 2001, a missing part of the sculpture turned up among stones scattered near the figure. It fits perfectly onto the lower part of the two-faced figure and establishes without a doubt that the original sculpture was almost twice the height of the present one. More importantly, you can see that the narrow band in relief, thought to be a phallus, is actually a long band extending downwards from the centre of the belt. There is a similar raised band on the opposite side. Claire Foley, one of the two editors of the Archaeological Survey of County Fermanagh, suggests that this may represent the fold of a garment or a decorative band. I've already drawn your attention to a similar feature on two of the White Island figures, shown wearing similar garments. The only difference in these two figures is that the central raised bands meet up with a similar band at the hem, but on the Bow Island figures there's no hem, as the stone has broken above the hem on both sides. This interpretation could link the carving of the Bow Island figure with that of the early medieval figures on White Island. However, there is a huge difference in sculptural quality between the Bow Island figure and the White Island figures. The vitality of the Bow Island figure is in the bold, powerful faces and the rigidly crossed arms, but much less accomplished are the traces of garment, decorative bands, or folds. By contrast, all the detail of the White Island figures is evidence of accomplished work, beautifully and carefully carved to illustrate the religious messages. There are several other reasons for doubting that this sculpture originated in pre-Christian times. One is that there are no examples of a pre-Christian figure with crossed arms, whereas on the south pillar at Carndonagh in Donegal, there's a very good example of a figure with crossed arms accompanied by the Christian emblems of a bell, book and crozier. There's also a report that when the artist Dunoyer made sketches of the figure in 1841, a local man told him that he remembered seeing a piece of stone set in the hollow on top of the figure. He took this to be a small cross. The figure in the foreground was dug up in a graveyard on Lustymoor Island in the 19th century and brought here in the 1930s. The carving is unimpressive and lacks the impact of the double figure. The name Killides comes from an order of hermit monks called Caoilí Day, which means companions of God. Their aim was to achieve spiritual renewal through a strict observance of monastic life and to concentrate on meditation and the study of the liturgy. They came to Fermanagh from the monasteries of Tallaght and Finglas near Dublin, and with the approval of Devenish Monastery, they founded a monastery at Killides in the second half of the 8th century. The monks of Devenish set aside land to support the new monastery, and in the 17th century were still recorded as the owners of this land. The sculptor who carved this stone in Killides graveyard expressed an understanding of unusual religious symbols. The very shape of the cross, the head within a circle and the stem below, is now considered by two scholars, Conor Newman and Niamh Walsh, to represent the Christian banner or standard that the Roman Emperor Constantine I established as the imperial flag of the entire Roman Empire. They found similar carvings in Lombardy and believe the main message coming from this type of cross is the importance of the resurrection. There is also symbolism of the Trinity in the little triangular shapes on the arms of the cross, each made up of 3 arcs. The Cayley Day monasteries at Tala and Finglas were among the first to be attacked by Vikings, and we know that Vikings destroyed Devenish Monastery in 837 AD. The Viking raids on Lough Erne may have put an end to the monastery at Killadise, although, like Devenish, it may have recovered. The cover design from an English psalter in the Bodleian Library captures the monk's joy in playing church music. As part of the significant reform and invigoration of the Irish Church in the 12th century, new religious orders such as the Augustinians Regular were introduced from abroad. They strongly supported the practice of pilgrimage as a worthy form of devotion, and the order played an important role in providing guesthouse accommodation for pilgrims going to St. Patrick's Purgatory. Their most important monasteries were at Devenish and Lough Derg, and in promoting the pilgrimage they used St. Patrick's name rather than the lesser-known name of St. Davach, the local saint at Lough Derg. This reconstruction is based on the work 40 years ago of two experts in church architecture, Anne Hamlin and Professor Roger Stalley. Faced with over 40 decorated stones found on Devenish, they were able to say that many of these stones once belonged to the doorway and chancel arch of a major 12th century Romanesque church. They suggest that the Augustinians built this lost church on the exact same site as the present 15th century priory. Devenish Parish Church was moved from the island to Monet about 1630, and in 1804, when Monet Church was being rebuilt, the east window of the Augustinian priory became the east window of Monet Church. In the later renovation of 1890, the window was moved to the south wall of the church. On the front are symbols of the four evangelists in silver gilt. The man, lion, calf and eagle represent Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. The shrine would have been displayed in a small wooden church on Devenish dedicated to St. Melesha, the founder of the monastery. It held a small gospel book, perhaps the one that Melesha was reputed to have brought from Rome. Today, you can see the remains of a small Romanesque church replace the wooden church in the 12th century. Midway on the shaft of this beautiful cross, you can see a small recess where a religious relic could have been displayed, perhaps protected by a glass insert. From earliest Christian times, there were strict laws in place to protect relics from theft. This fine round tower in the background was built in the 12th century. The mould found during excavations at St. Mary's Augustinian Priory, Devenish, is a remarkable discovery, as there is very little evidence for medieval pilgrims' badges in Ireland. Remarkable too is this reconstruction of the shape of this badge by artist Darren Little. The mould found during excavations at St. Mary's Augustinian Priory, Devenish, is a remarkable discovery, as there is very little evidence for medieval pilgrims' badges in Ireland. Remarkable too is this reconstruction of the shape of this badge by artist Darren Little. To read this map, you have to imagine yourself at the north, looking south over the island of Ireland. Everything is inverted. At the bottom right is St. Patrick's Purgatory, taking up a huge amount of space, and south of it are the islands of Lough Erne, which open out to the Atlantic and a port near Assaroe. Notice a couple of ships along the east coast, suggesting that the main sea route to Ireland was through the ports of Dublin and Drogheda. There was a pilgrims' hostel in Drogheda, and from Drogheda there was a good route to Lough Derg along the Boyne and the Blackwater valleys, staying at monasteries on the way. Detours to Armagh and Clogher were usually necessary to make donations and get permission to do the pilgrimage. I would now like to talk about the monastic guest houses in Fermanagh. We've learned from Monsignor Flynn's talk earlier this year about the flow of pilgrims to St. Patrick's Purgatory, not only from England and Ireland, but from many countries across the European continent. These pilgrimages continued throughout the medieval period and inevitably led to a need for larger guest houses in the monasteries along the pilgrim routes. In Fermanagh, it was mainly the clergy who organised these guest houses, although there is a record that King Huanach Maguire's son John maintained a guest house in Fermanagh until he was killed in 1431. Another 15th century record identifies two bishops of Clogher, Art MacCowell and Ross Maguire, who ran guest houses not just for pilgrims but also for the poor and for what are described as bardic bands, presumably poets and musicians. The Annals of Ulster tell us in their obituary for Joan Maguire, wife of the Archdeacon of Clogher, that she maintained a guest house for pilgrims at the long-established monasteries of St. Fansha at Rossore and St. Sinel at Cleanish. Her support began in the year 1371 and continued until her death 56 years later. The Augustinian canons built a monastery here in the 12th century on the site of the 6th century monastery founded by St. A or Hugh. The Augustinians, so much acknowledged for supporting pilgrimages, are very likely to have maintained a pilgrim's guest house here. Donald Fee, the abbot of Derrybrusque Monastery, ran a guest house there in the 15th century. And not long afterwards the vicar, Gilchrist O'Fee, continued running this guest house for 40 years. When the vicar died in 1482, his obituary praised him highly for his good management of the guest house, a comment being made that he had run it beautifully. Providing guest house services for pilgrims must have given a great boost to the monks and brought a lot of vitality to the smaller monasteries. The original church was probably built in the 12th century and had a west doorway later blocked. The east end was added possibly in the 13th century when it was used as a parish church. The beautifully shaped cross may also belong to the 12th century. Made of unusually thin sandstone, it consists of two stones joined by tenon and mortise. A pilgrim to St. Patrick's Purgatory is likely to have owned this small 16th century pewter bottle and may have found accommodation in the monastery here. Similar bottles have been found on two shipwrecks, the famous Mary Rose of Henry VIII, sunk off Portsmouth in 1545, and another off Alderney in the Channel Isles later in the 16th century. It's a very small bottle and probably held wine for church and communion service rather than water or spirits for personal use. The first pilgrimage that Thomas Oge Maguire made to Compostela was in 1428 in the company of his uncle A. Maguire from Enniskillen Castle, known as Hugh the Hospitable. Some 8 years previously, there had been a serious family fallout when Thomas Oge and his brother Philip had attacked Hugh, their uncle, perhaps making a protest at Hugh's family right to succeed to their father's throne. During this conflict, Thomas Oge had killed Hugh's eldest son, Donald Carrick, in single combat, but subsequently Hugh defeated his nephews and retained control of Western Fermanagh. After this, apparently, the two branches of the family were reconciled, which enabled Hugh and Thomas Oge to make the pilgrimage together. Nevertheless, we can assume that Thomas, in deference to the grief he had caused his uncle, was making the pilgrimage to do penance for his crime and make reparation. There's evidence to suggest that Hugh and Thomas Oge experienced horrendous weather and stormy seas on their boat journey back to Ireland, so much so that Thomas Oge felt in great danger of dying. We know that after this frightening experience, Thomas Oge made a promise to God that if he were saved, he would take a vow of poverty for the rest of his life. Sadly, this pilgrimage ended in tragedy, with Hugh Maguire dying in Kinsale and being buried in Cork, far from his home. As for Thomas Oge's promise, he was later obliged to get a dispensation from the Pope, allowing him to continue ruling Fermanagh. This interesting stone from Inniskeen Church near Enniskillen illustrates the legend of St. James's body being brought from Judea to Compostela. It may have been inspired by King Thomas Oge's second pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela. The annals mention that he made a second pilgrimage, but not when it took place. However, in 1550 we know that the king made a pilgrimage to Rome for the Jubilee year, when he would have received a plenary indulgence leading to full remission of his sins. He didn't return to Fermanagh until 1451, which was a Jubilee year in Santiago de Compostela. So this may have encouraged him to make a detour to Compostela on his way home and gain further remission of his sins. There is also a reference to Thomas Oge Maguire making a last pilgrimage to Compostela towards the end of his life after he had retired from the kingship. When Thomas Oge returned to Fermanagh in 1451, there was great rejoicing on his safe return, particularly among the poets and craftsmen who depended so much on his support. Two other Fermanagh pilgrims who had also set out in 1450 were less fortunate. The parson of Devenish, Nicholas O'Flanagan, died in Rome that year, as did Murkertach O'Flanagan, who died of the plague. This is the kind of church that Thomas Oge might have visited in Rome. A particularly attractive part of this composition for me are the delightful sheep representing the 12 apostles. In the early days of Christianity in Ireland, there were regular visits from Irish monks to Rome as part of their Christian ministry. The founder of every new monastery was expected to visit Rome to collect relics of saints and martyrs. We know, for example, that monks from Armagh Monastery went to Rome to gather relics of Saints Peter, Paul, Stephen and Lawrence, and that these were venerated in the 7th century. St. Tiernock, who died in 549 AD, is recorded as visiting Rome, and St. Malesha is also said to have gone to Rome to collect relics for his new foundation at Devenish. By the end of the 11th century, there was an Irish monastic community in Rome where pilgrims could stay, And in the 12th century, Irish pilgrims could stay at the monastery of Sancta Trinitas Scotorum and be looked after by Irish monks. I think this is a remarkably lively version of the escape of the Israelites from Egypt to the safety of the Promised Land. On the left is the scene showing Pharaoh's foot soldiers and horsemen following behind the Egyptian king in his chariot and pursuing Moses and the Israelites. Right is the upright figure of Moses causing the Red Sea to engulf the Egyptian army and allowing the Israelites to reach safety. A chaotic scene in the centre shows the drowning of the Pharaoh's army, with a soldier tumbling forward to join some other soldiers already cast into the sea. These scenes show the three magi arriving with their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to pay homage to the infant Jesus. The leader points triumphantly to the star to explain how they were able to reach Bethlehem. And don't forget to have a good look at these wonderful camels.